no.
Oh, no, sorry. Michael Klein. Michael, you're next. You want to go second.
No.
It's because we look so much alike. He got confused.
I got confused.
Okay.
I'll make it quick. Thank you. Hello. It's the most intimate, strangest meeting I've ever attended. I mean, it's really intimate. Thank you for coming. I actually been in this room once before, and it wasn't this crowded, so it's very different. I'm thrilled to be reading with Toby, Olson, and Melanie Braverman. I'm sorry, Charles Ford couldn't make it. Thank you, Neil, for reading. I hope it wasn't because I couldn't give him a ride. I have a feeling it might have been. I have a new book, which I am and I'm a writer that never knows that they have a new book because I write poetry. So it gathers into something, and then, but I also write prose, and some of this is prose and some of it is poetry. And it's Derby Day, or it's Belmont Day, and I was a groom for a Kentucky Derby winner in 1984 named Swale, and I thought I would open with a poem called Swale. It's Derby Day. Oh, and it might be a Triple Crown. I think there actually will be a Triple Crown winner as of 7 o'clock. Do you know? Anybody following that? You think, right?
Yeah.
I think better chance than any year, because he's beat everything in the race for one thing, and it's a great American Pharaoh. I mean, how could you not be a Triple Crown with that name? Swale. It's Derby Day, and it's been 30 years since 1984 when I stood in the grandstand at Churchill Downs after betting my last $20 on Swale, that horse I groomed and watched as he pulled away from Wayne Lucas's great filly Althea to win the 110th running of the race. 30 years and a lot of souls have risen to the upper register of life, and my own life has been made more reachable by what their love did to me. I read some books and wrote some books and watched performances that moved my thinking. I've seen the man who gave me horses go home to his mother, and I've seen other horses break down or go home to the grasses of their beginning to make more of their blazing kind. And after it all, I met the love of my life, and when the government turned something over, I foolishly married him. Foolishly only because all marriage is foolish, that errand into the maze. It's Derby Day, and I'm remembering my life in a stable and the ordinary living that spilled around it. I've eaten good food in places that had views of the everlasting, and I'm certain I've seen the face of God on more than one occasion, and I've held animals so close to my own body that something in theirs must have passed through mine. But nothing has given me more life than watching that big, black, beautiful, shining soul run through the animal line and past all comprehension into the music of his speed and win that race on the first Saturday in May in the year of forever. Here's to Swale and to others of his kind, creature of my joy and of my sorrow. It's actually, if you want to read it again, it's also in the current issue of Oxford American, which is this wonderful magazine out of the South. And I have nothing to contribute at all about the South except that poem. So I'm really happy they took it.
What's the name of the book?
This book is called When I Was a Twin. It's out in September, but I actually have like 2 or 3 advanced reader copies in the next room. Because that's all I have. I would have brought more, but that's all I have. And if you buy one, please don't tell anybody that you have one. I don't care, but you know, there's an official publication date. The official publication date is September. This is another horse poem because I'm in the mood. It's called Other Horses. I wept in a stable. I found money in the dirt. I reenacted a car accident in the tack room. I asked the horse van driver to let me off where the bridle path stopped. I looked at the jockey for what he was dreaming. I told him he was wrong about making things happen. He couldn't make things happen. I couldn't make things happen anymore. There is exactly not enough money in the world. Magical thinking got me where I am today. Animals are warriors of time. I stopped keeping things hidden. That wasn't a horse we saw in the winner's circle. I can't stop horses as much as you can't stop horses. How are you? Good. And then one more, The Lives of Horses. I wrote it, I actually wrote a whole memoir. It's called Track Conditions, and on the cover of that book is a picture of me leading Swale off the racetrack after a race that he actually lost, called the race before he won the Derby, which is called the Lexington, I think. It was on the Keeneland racetrack. And at Keeneland racetrack, the crowds at Keeneland are so 1%, basically, that there's no track announcer. That if you're really a horse lover, you're supposed to know the silks by heart. Like, you're supposed to know who's in front by it, you don't need a track announcer because you are so devoted to the sport. And I didn't know this. I knew my horse was way behind. He had lost that race, and then he came and won the Derby. This is called The Lives of Horses. Somebody called me after reading my book about horse racing and wanted to tell me that he'd been on the track too, jip tracks mostly. The way that I had been at jip tracks at the beginning of something that took longer than I ever thought it would take in life, especially my life. I need to be called to places. And this man wanted to know the real names of the people in the book, some of them, the daredevils, the ones who made me change. But most of all, he wanted to know whatever happened to Richard, my racetrack lover, the guy who got me hitched to that dying star that only relighted in the winner's circle. So we talked a little bit about track life, and eventually I was feeling sort of put upon because here was the real reason for the call, which is always the reason for the call. He'd written a book too about the racetrack, and I'm not really a writer, etc., etc. And before he could officially ask, I said, of course I'll read it, but only the first 20 pages, and if I like it, I'll finish it. For the whole time talking to him, looking back through my mind for the room that had the cot and the radio in it at the end of the barn that I hadn't lived in for years. Finally, I told him I appreciated the call. I heard in his must-have-been 75-year-old Tallahassee drawl the soul of someone who was in love with a kind of life that wasn't for him anymore. And he was my brother there in that ago life. So inadequately lit, no matter what racetrack he was working on, or what bar they kicked him out of, because last call had been called and called and called. He was my brother back, today from the races, from the dream life of horses, calling me to tell me that he'd stayed alive too. This is like clapping out your poems. Like, this is a new trend. I like so odd. I love it. It's like karaoke poetry. It's really odd. It's so great. Who says poetry is dead? Hear, hear. Illness as matador. I'm not good around sick people. It's a character flaw. I ask them what they need, but if they aren't clear as day, I miss the signs and don't know what to do. I'm not intuitive. I'm impatient. I'm brutal, like something you pick up and put down because it's too heavy. I don't know how to behave or make somebody feel any better. I'm not sexy around sickness. I know it's not my job to make them feel better, and I know it's not their job to make me feel better when I am sick. I always figure that sick people want to be left alone in the bleak terrain of the theoretical life without other people until life comes back in full company. For me, a sick person is a version of a person, the body-snatched version, which of course isn't true, which is why I'm not good around sick people. My hard wiring in the illness area is sloppy and wrong. I have empathy for people right up until they get sick. Most people, that's not really true. but for the pros, it's not a true story. Most people get better, and I wait for that to happen. My mother skidded on black ice one morning in the country on her way to work at the Seamless Rubber Company and was almost killed, skipping illness. We can't hold people in the world. There's no notice that we can make. When I get sick, I never surrender to it. I can only feel it as something fighting my body like a matador. Health is the bull. I'll take anything and everything to not feel pain because my recovering alcoholism says that I do, and because I say that I have too much to do, which isn't true. Edmund White once said in an interview that writing can make him physically ill. Joyce Carol Oates once said to write even when you are sick. Elizabeth Hardwick wrote in Sleepless Nights, a book that comes out of a dream when it talks about Billie Holiday, that when you travel, you don't exist, which is how I feel most of the time I get sick. Nobody can see me because I don't know what I am feeling when I am sick, except the sickness. Illness possesses me completely, which may finally be the reason why I'm so bad around sick people. I don't exist. How can you?
Take my kid to the camp.
Okay. Go ahead, Grace.
Put another quarter in the therapy jar, Jim.
I don't want to interrupt you.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, thanks.
James Shannon, everyone. Tree surgeon. And Grace.
Hi, Gracie.
Don't get lost. Very black.
So there's more seats in that?
I'm telling you. Look for the books. Marie Howe and I are dear friends. Some of you know Marie. She's a wonderful poet. This book is dedicated to Marie Howe. All my books are dedicated to women poets, and it was her turn. The first book actually should have been dedicated to her. But we had this assignment. We gave each other an assignment because she was writing a memoir. She's writing a memoir, and she was stuck. And so she wanted to remember she was a writer, so she was writing poems, and we went back and forth every Sunday with poems. And only one of those survived and made it into the book. Hers were great. But I was glad for the exercise. So this is one of it's called I'm Trying to Fulfill the Advent and Making Rhyme assignment. That was the assignment, to try to make, I don't write things that rhyme, but to try to make something that rhymes and also to have the Advent in it. Okay. Thank God, I was waiting for that assignment. So happy somebody that I love that gave it to me. So this is that. And so it sounds different than anything I've ever written. When Marie said that the poem had to speak to the Advent, all I could think of in the small closet space between nothing and Christmas was the calendar and all the windows I opened, until the days pushed through like birds and some of the cluttered songs in the trees, and how impatient I was with time or time with me. And like anybody who grew up to be someone completely different, I opened all the windows for the unlived days at once, as if time was something weirdly happening behind everything and not inside, that you could look into time without having it. And when Marie said to slouch towards Advent in rhyme, all I could do was rhyme with time and not go more grace notes further, because the space between rhyming and not rhyming is the space I move in now that I am not just like this, completely different than I was. Speaking of was, once I read a rhyme for me and some other words, Stevens's famous Shadow, and liked its predictable running, okay enough. But because I am somebody who doesn't see the world that way and think of it more as a fading down, end-stopped dialectic, I don't think, give any sensible pleasure to the rhymed line written by someone like me. But I would give this, what somebody who knew me already got. Shadow, shadow, trouble, trouble. Now you, make up the rhyme for you. And she did. I'm going to read two more, and then I will give you the podium over. Thank you so much for coming. It's great. It's always surprising when people show up. It is. It really is. It's a really hard thing to get people to come to a reading. Everything okay? Okay. Sorry. David Jones was an artist who lived in Provincetown. Anybody know David Jones? Yeah. I love David Jones. I'm sort of in love with David Jones. I'm always in love with somebody, even when I'm, you know. Even when I'm with people I'm not supposed to be in love with. That's what I meant to say. But anyway, he was this really good friend of mine, and they died very mysteriously. They don't know if he OD'd or if he was murdered, and they found his body up at the breakwater. And this is for David Jones. It's called David Jones. There was this beautiful sunset in Wellfleet in the 90s that I can't have anymore. And I was doing a play I wrote for one character called 10,000 Hands That Touched Me that nobody liked. Cold, cannibalized from other work. My friend, who I was in love with, used to swim with me before I had to get on stage and try to make my life sound like hunger or beauty or noise. We swam out to where it was hard to distinguish the water from the sky, to that favorite part of living where you stop talking. And I would rock him in my arms until he became the lightest human being in the world. And years later, he washed up on the rocks at the breakwater end of Provincetown. He was murdered, some people said, or he had OD'd. And when he was the lightest human being in the world, I loved him and knew I would never say that I loved him, which made it fade and come back like a searchlight on a wave. When he was light like this, he was David at the moment of the idea of David, before something or somebody dropped David's body at the end of the street where the water started. Thank you. And I will leave you with a poem called Harmonium, which is the first poem in the book, and it's also in the Commercial Plowshares. And I just mentioned that because it's a really interesting issue. It's a transatlantic issue, so it's mostly American, and it's mostly British and Irish poets. And I was very privileged to be chosen among the, in the submissions. A guy named Neil Astley edited it. Neil has a wonderful anthology called Staying Alive, which is this incredible, you know that anthology? Oh. It's really a great anthology of poetry, which is it was published by Miramax, the film company, and you'd think, oh, well, it's easy, you can't get it. It's completely out of print. But it's a great, for teachers in the room, it's a great anthology to teach. It's the anthology I use. And I had to make copies, blah, 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 because you can never find the book. Harmonium, there's an epigraph by Aaron Smith, which is very simple. It just says, someone is putting the world back together again. Here's what's different. Bruce, who is now Sheila, won't join a gym because she's still transitioning and can't change clothes in either locker room. Father? It's the vegan Mr. Softy.
You think of that for everything.
What is that? What was that?
Ice cream truck.
It's just one of those
Yeah.
interesting melodies.
I know.
Sort of Weberish. Harmonium. Well, here's what's different. Bruce, who's now Sheila, won't join a gym because she's still transitioning and can't change clothes in either locker room. She's between two rooms at a time, and the country is different but the same. Everything we talked about, nothing really changes except the extent. But there's a lot more death since you died. People live for it now. Endless wars in countries that seem like they are being torn out of the book of Earth. Peace is revolutionary, that hasn't changed. But intelligence is less popular now, and inspiration, there's no money in it. Some of us have been possessed by a more fearful version of who we are and aim the camera at ourselves to make sure we are living. I can't even say the word for what the picture is called, but it begins with self. I can barely recognize this because of something called fashion. Where are the conspiracies of community? I want to stay changing. Websites, so many websites like Radium. There's a website that consists entirely of lists. Whenever I look at a list with names on it, I think of death and awards. Movies are different since you died. You don't have to go to them anymore. They come through television along with news from another planet, similar to this one. The other planet has some of the same names for places. Fukushima, Russia. In one of the Russias you can't be gay. When you were alive, the best thing about being gay was the poetry and the other arts that came through the gay body. Now all anybody wants to do is get married, which I did, but it was never on a list. A whim, really. A garden rose out of nowhere in Provincetown. Me and Andrew, Amy took pictures in the sun. I got to read out loud. Queer minds were the best minds of my generation. Queer shoulder to the wheel and all that. And Ginsberg, he died too. But you know that. He's right next to you with his living harmonium, standing at the wheel, standing at the board with a piece of cosmic chalk in his hand, ready to draw the world all over again. A world Suzanne G. dreamed would hold all the people. If this sounds rhetorical and simplistic, it is, because the idea that I live at all is rhetorical and simplistic. Here I am, as I do. I wake forgetting that everything eventually gets lost to the culmination. And so today I held my living closer than I thought it was, and saw two beautiful kids in front of the Chinese takeout draw a line in colored chalk down the whole length of sidewalk between Broadway and Cooper where I live, switching colors every few feet, so it looked like they were pressing a rainbow down into the earth. I don't know what the line is for, or when they'll ever stop it, or if it will come again, but I hope it never ends. I hope it's the line keeping the world in the sky.